King Manasseh and Amon were the 13th and 14th of 19 kings for southern Judah. Manasseh had the longest reign of any king in Israel's history at 55 years, while Amon's reign was only 2 years. What makes Manasseh so famous is that he is described as the most evil king to have ever ruled. When we look at the history of the kings, we see that Manasseh was the first king to rule after northern Israel was deported by the Assyrians in 722 BC. At this point in Judah's history, Assyria was the main oppressor as they had earlier conquered northern Israel and came close to conquering Jerusalem under Sennacherib if it wasn't for the angel of the Lord slaying 185,000 Assyrians in one night. As seen in our earlier videos for Josiah through Zedekiah, the events described in the Bible are backed up by Near East archaeology. So as we move back to Josiah's father and grandfather, we will look for evidence that corroborates the biblical accounts. Manasseh's story is primarily filled with all the evils that he committed, but in the broad story of Israel, he is an example of how sinful the nation was becoming and God's patience with them was running its course. His evils are worth mentioning to get an image of what was taking place. He had more abominations than any other nation, rebuilt Asherah statues, worshipped and served all the hosts of heaven, re-established Baal worship, built pagan altars in the temple, made his sons pass through the fire of Molech in the valley of Hinnom, was soothsaying, used witchcraft, divination, and sorcery, consulted mediums and spiritists, shedded enough innocent blood to fill the streets of Jerusalem. In Jeremiah 15:4, he was called a horror to the nations, and in Hebrews 11:37, some have alluded that the fact that he was the one who sawed Isaiah in half. So let's move to his son Amon's evils. It said that he sacrificed carved images, he served the images also, and he trespassed more and more than his father even did. And lastly, it said that he forsook the Lord. Now yes, these two kings were evil, but the people of Judah didn't do anything about it either. In fact, they joined in on it. In 2 Chronicles 33:9-10 says, Manasseh made Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to err, and to do worse than the heathen, whom the Lord had destroyed before the children of Israel. This was in speaking to Joshua's conquest. And the Lord spake to Manasseh and to his people, but they would not hearken. We read here that God was trying to warn them, but he was also mercifully withholding judgment in the hope that they would repent. Yet in verse 10 finishes with that they would not listen to the God. The Bible continues with that, Wherefore the Lord brought upon them the captains of the host of the king of Assyria, which took Manasseh among the thorns, and bound him with fetters, and carried him to Babylon. And when he was in affliction, he besought the Lord his God, and humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers. So it is here that we learn that God brought the Assyrians to punish Manasseh for his sins, but that it was the means by which it drove Manasseh to humble himself in acknowledging he deserved his punishment. Manasseh is one of the greatest examples of God's patience and mercy with someone who, for decades, caused more evil than anyone else. Now compared to Amon's reign, we read that Amon did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, as did Manasseh his father. For Amon sacrificed unto all the carved images which Manasseh his father had made, and served them, and humbled not himself before the Lord, as Manasseh his father had humbled himself. But Amon trespassed more and more. When comparing these two kings, one humbled himself before God, and the other forsook the Lord, but both were offered mercy if they would repent. Nice are these stories to serve the reader with understanding of God's desire for us to turn away from evil and to follow it. But what evidence is there that these stories and the kings are true and historical? So here are 5 reasons why the accounts found in the Bible can be trusted. Number 1. Esarhaddon's Prism. The library of Ashurbanipal was excavated at the ancient city of Nineveh. The majority of the library's contents is currently held at the British Museum. The Esarhaddon Prism is one of the most important as it provides us with details as to the strength of the Assyrian Empire at this time. On the prism, Esarhaddon says, I called up the kings of the country Hatti, and of the region on the other side of the river Euphrates, Baal, king of Tyre, Manasseh, king of Judah, and the list goes on from there. That altogether 22 kings of Hatti, the seashore and the islands, all these I sent out, and made them transport under terrible difficulties to Nineveh. First thing that we can make note is that Esarhaddon names Manasseh directly, and also that the Assyrian Empire held authority over the Near East all the way to Persia at this time. Number 2. Esarhaddon's evil brothers. From 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles, and the book of Isaiah, all say that after the angel of the Lord had slayed 185,000 Assyrians, that Sennacherib king of Assyria departed, and went and returned, and dwelt at Nineveh. And it came to pass, meaning sometime down the road, that Sennacherib was worshipping in the house of Nisroch his god, that Adramelech and Sharezer his son assassinated him with the sword, and they escaped into the land of Armenia, and Esarhaddon his son reigned in his stead. So the Bible accurately describes the transition of power from Sennacherib to Esarhaddon that parallels Judah's transition from King Hezekiah to Manasseh. Looking further into the prism, Esarhaddon says that on line 10 that Sennacherib appointed him over his older brothers as the next king. As Esarhaddon's brothers found out, they are described on lines 27 and 28 as planning rebellion against this decision of their father Sennacherib. On lines 41 through 44 describes how Esarhaddon's brothers tried to kill him and claim the throne. So when you compare the prism with the Bible, we see the same description of Esarhaddon's brothers as being jealous and evil enough to kill their own brother and their father. Number 3. Esarhaddon's restoration of Babylon. On another prism from the library of Ashurbanipal, describes how Esarhaddon began to rebuild Babylon in his first year in 681 BC after his father Sennacherib had destroyed the city because of its rebellion against Assyrian rule. This is important because the Bible describes Manasseh being taken to Babylon. Critics used to say that the Bible was in error as Babylon was destroyed by Sennacherib, but ultimately the Bible was found correct. It's a lesson that repeats itself many times over in Near East archaeology. The who, the what, the when, and the where of the Bible has been shown to be accurate over and over again. It's the how and why that makes critics try to punch holes into the biblical accounts to cast the illusion that the Bible is full of historical errors. Number 4. Ashurbanipal Cylinder C. Cylinder C's account is similar to the Esarhaddon Prism in that Ashurbanipal says during his march to Egypt, 22 kings from the seashore, the islands, and the mainland, servants who belonged to me, brought heavy gifts to me and kissed my feet. The 22 kings are listed with Manasseh of Judah still reigning as king. So Manasseh's 55-year reign makes sense since together Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal's reign are together 53 years. Since both refer to Manasseh as a servant, it can draw light upon all the evils that he committed. Being called a servant to Assyria, this means that he would have gone the coward route versus relying on God to protect him in Judah like he did for his father Hezekiah when Sennacherib was besieging Jerusalem. So Manasseh wasn't just serving the Assyrian kings, he was embedding their pagan culture and practices into Judah, Jerusalem, and in the temple itself. Number 5. Ashurbanipal's torture in Babylon. Manasseh's imprisonment in Babylon is described that he was bound in fetters, took with hooks, and was afflicted while there. The Bible isn't specific on which year Manasseh was taken to Babylon or by which Assyrian king, but the contents of the story matches accounts of Assyrian torture. Reliefs have been found showing Assyrians literally ripping the skin off of their victims. On one relief, Ashurbanipal says, "I will hack up the flesh and then carry it with me," to show off in other countries. Many historians say that Assyria was the most grotesque of all cultures when it came to the means of their torture. Ashurbanipal's statement and the Bible's description of Manasseh's affliction of being taken with hooks in his nose do mirror one another. Overall, we can see that from the prisms, the cylinders, and the reliefs for Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal that the accounts for King Manasseh and Ammon found in 2 Kings, 1 and 2 Chronicles, the book of Jeremiah, and the Gospel of Matthew can be seen as historically accurate and not myth. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button below to stay up to date with the new videos as they come out.